Good morning. I'm working on my puzzle this morning before I have to go to work. I've already had 2 cups of coffee, been up since about 5:30. Got myself ready, got myself situated for the day. Happy Friday to everybody. Hi Link, here's Link. He likes to get up here and play when I'm working on this puzzle, so I have to be careful because he will take the pieces and they will go everywhere. So while I'm working on this, I wanted to talk a little bit about medication changes and how difficult that is. And that is probably goes for any kind of medication or type of condition, but I'm speaking just from my own experience with mental health medications. I have been on mental health, basically I've been on antidepressants for probably the better part of 15, 16 years. And I've had several changes within that time, but the biggest amount of changes that I've had has been the past 2 years. In fact, I was not entirely convinced that I am bipolar. I thought that it's the medication. I've thought in my head that perhaps it's the medications I've been on that have made me bipolar, that have changed the chemistry of my brain so much that now I'm reliant on them. Because I have not been off of, when I tried to get off of an antidepressant last year in April, I had missed a couple doses of my antidepressant. This is before I was diagnosed bipolar and I was still working for Cardinal Health. I was on Cymbalta, and that is an antidepressant. It's an SNRI. Rather than an SSRI, and so it has norepinephrine, I think is how you say it, whereas an SSRI does not contain norepinephrine. Anyways, so I was started on that medication at the beginning of 2023 for major depressive disorder, and I was on that for quite a while until I got back from treatment. And then, as I mentioned, I think I accidentally missed a couple doses, and then one day I decided I wasn't going to take it anymore, and which I knew better than to ever cold turkey quit a medication. I don't know why I made that decision, but after I did that, that's like almost immediately is when I experienced my first severe manic episode. So coming off of medication is what triggered, coming off of the antidepressant medication, namely Cymbalta, is what triggered my first ever manic psychotic episode. And then I had to get back on medications, and it took time because I was off of them for 3 months. So it took about 3 months for my system to catch back up and for me to feel better. Hence that 3-month depression that I had, severe depressive episode that I had that immediately followed the 3-month manic episode. It was horrible. That was awful. And in order to get through that, I had to go to different doctors. I went to a regular doctor who started me on Effexor, which is a sister medication to Cymbalta, because I told them what happened, that I quit taking that and that it caused such a severe reaction. And so they didn't want to put me on that. They put me on Effexor instead. But these medications can induce mania. So I was put on Effexor, and then when I had my car accidents earlier this year, I was on Effexor and I was on a mood stabilizer, but the combination just wasn't enough, and the Effexor induced mania so much that I had 2 psychotic episodes this year that both resulted in car accidents. So fortunately, I am on a good medication now that I've been more balanced. I'm waiting to make sure that I'm balanced for a good 3 months, which it's almost been. April, when did I start? I just started this medication though, about a month and a half ago. So I'm trying to make sure I'm stable for at least a good 3 months before I really jump back into trying to work any kind of job that would require me to, go in and be around people or whatever. Right now I do some door dashing, and I have a safety plan in place. I'm balanced. I'm on a good medication regimen. I've had some doctor changes. Finally, I found a good psychiatrist that I'm working with who has me on a medication that treats schizoaffective disorder. It's apparently the only one that's FDA approved to do so. and it's called Invega. So that has been working really well for me. I've been able to get off sleep meds. That's another thing. Insomnia comes with being bipolar. And so I had insomnia issues. Well, the insomnia started when I got off of Suboxone. When I was in treatment in Florida in 2023, I had to be put on trazodone because one of the withdrawal symptoms was like restless leg syndrome and not being able to sleep at night. And so they put me on trazodone. And so for a solid year and a half, I was on trazodone, and my new psychiatrist took me off of that. And finally, for the first time this past couple weeks, I've been able to fall asleep without any sleep medications, which has been amazing. But apparently trazodone can also induce manic episodes because it has serotonin in it, and having too much serotonin in your brain can induce a manic episode for people that are bipolar. That's what I've learned. So I'm not a professional. This is just what I've learned throughout being treated. So anyways, I don't know. I feel like when you're a bipolar patient or you have mental health issues, you kind of it's like you go in to their office, and I feel like sometimes there's a board there, and they take a dart and just throw the dart at the board, and whatever medication it lands on is the one that they try. And it takes a toll on your mental health. It takes a toll on your body because you're having to watch out for all these different side effects and things. And then a lot of times it can take time for that medication to build up in your system enough for you to even feel a difference. So it's just hard. I wish if I could go back to when I originally was put on medication, I really wish that I had asked more questions. I wish that I had asked what the alternatives were, what I could try before going on medication, diet and exercise, I think, and therapy is what I should have been told to do, but that's not what I was told to do. I was just put on a medication, and has that had an effect over the past 15, 16 years that I've been on these medications? I think so. I think it makes sense that I was diagnosed bipolar, just given my history with, I'm a trauma survivor. I've experienced a lot of different types of trauma throughout my life since I was a child. And that certainly has had an impact, and I think contributed to the diagnosis. But I also have the family history and the genetic makeup that made it possible. I believe that my mom, who passed away about 20 years ago, I was 21, she had just turned 40. I believe she was probably bipolar 2, undiagnosed, and mental health just wasn't as talked about. I mean, we didn't have like iPhones then, I think they hadn't come out yet. And so smartphones, we were kind of just starting. Like I remember there were Blackberries and things like that probably, but anyways, all that to say, mental health just wasn't talked about as much. And so I think she was undiagnosed. And then my dad passed away this year. I think he probably had bipolar depression because he was depressed a lot. And I know he had been on Prozac since I was a kid, since I could remember. So it definitely, there's the genetic component, but I just can't help but to think that the medications have maybe caused, they help, but I think sometimes they can hurt too, if not done properly. And I think a lot of that is the doctor's fault, but also I wish that I had asked more questions. But you don't know what you don't know. And at the time I didn't know, and I was not educated, and now I am, but it's kind of too late for me now. So now that my understanding now that I'm diagnosed bipolar, I'm basically stuck. Like the only thing that can treat it is medications and continued therapy, but it's a chronic condition that I'll live with for the rest of my life, and that I'm gonna have to try to manage and cope with. And it's very, very difficult because it's not just bipolar that I'm coping with. I also have complex PTSD from severe trauma throughout my life. And so when you're bipolar and you have episodes, they're traumatic in and of themselves. You traumatize yourself. Sometimes you traumatize the people that you love the most, people around you. And so it's very hard because then you deal with the aftermath of that and the reconciliation and realizing maybe things that you said out of anger, things that because you couldn't control it, things that you said that maybe hurt somebody that you love, things that you believed, false beliefs that you had about people around you, which I've had, which is a very scary part of this illness. When you start thinking that people around you aren't who you have known them to be your entire life, which from my understanding, is a very common symptom. I was mashing common and symptom together, but it's a very common symptom of people who experience psychotic episodes. You have a psychotic break, and trying to distinguish truth from reality just becomes so difficult for your brain because you lose access to logic. You lose access to the part of your brain that's responsible for logic and reasoning. And instead you're operating from a much lower part, the limbic, I think is what my therapist says. That could be completely wrong. I don't know, don't quote me, but that lower part of your brain, reptilian brain, that just controls like the basic function of basic human functions. And so that's why you see a lot of hypersexuality as a symptom of bipolar disorder. That's a really common one, hypersexuality. Spiritual, there's a lot of people, get a God complex because you feel, I think you're so vulnerable in that state mentally, and I think that's why you feel so close and you can maybe perceive things that typically, normal people can't perceive. I don't know if it's that, if it's a sensitivity to it, or if it's just literally your brain is just believing anything. It's probably a combination. But anyways, with all that being said, I just thought, I haven't even worked on my puzzle. I've just been talking. I hope you don't mind. But I just really wanted to have this discussion. I think it's important, and I think this could help somebody maybe who is just kind of going to the doctors now because they're experiencing symptoms of anxiety, symptoms of PTSD, symptoms of depression, etc. And I would just caution you to just ask questions. Ask what's alternatives that you can do before trying medication. Try that first, and then if that doesn't work, add medication. I'm not saying medication isn't important and isn't needed. It clearly is. I'm on medications, and I probably have to be for the rest of my life. But I would be lying to you if I said that I didn't have some resentment towards medications and towards the pharmaceutical industry as a whole. Just what it's done to me and my family and to countless others, and even though I worked in that and that was my career, I'm still a person and a human, and it really affected me personally. And so I just think it's important that I talk about it, because if my story can help even just one person, then it will make all the pain that I have went through, and trust me, it's been a lot, it would make all of it worth it. So that's why I am vulnerable, and I'm willing to get on here and to share really intimate parts of my life that most people would keep private. I just feel like I have a voice, and if nothing else, I'm so grateful for the time that I had in my career, for everything that it taught me, because it wasn't easy when I was there either. I was nervous a lot. Public speaking was one of the hardest things for me, like getting up and talking like this, believe it or not, was like the most difficult thing for me to do, because I just had it in my head that I sounded stupid, or that everybody else was smarter than me, like I didn't deserve to be there. I very much had what you call imposter syndrome almost my entire career, and I just felt like everybody was just smarter. I just felt very intimidated, and that all goes back to trauma. That just goes back to trauma from being a kid and not ever feeling good enough, and just the feelings that I had that were not true, that I'm like working now to heal and to unlearn. But anyways, I'm grateful for the time I had there. It helped it helped me with my voice. it helped me find my voice, and even though I was afraid to speak publicly, it's something that I chased when I was there. I volunteered myself for things that would put me in situations where I would have to face that fear, right? So that's how I was able to conquer that, and it wasn't easy. I had to rely on medication to help me do that. A really good one actually is called propranolol, and that's the one that I was given for anxiety at work, because usually it was before a meeting or before somewhere where I had to talk or be in front of people, and because it was, I think the reason now in hindsight is because I had to mask a lot at work. When you're bipolar, you know, likely I was undiagnosed bipolar the entire, you know, for years, my whole life. But it's really hard to mask anxiety and to try to mask depression when you're dealing with those kind of things on an ongoing basis. And then to try to come to work and leave that, compartmentalize it, leave it at home, and, you know, just be kind of on and happy and professional, you know, all the time. It got to the point where it was exhausting. So anyways, I hope this has made sense and hasn't been too rambly, and I hope somebody can get something out of it, if nothing else, and I hope it can help at least one person. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. I appreciate your support. I hope you have a happy Friday. Today's Friday as I'm filming this. I hope you have a good weekend, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye.